Having been an avid rFactor 2 player for the last few months, surpassing even the amount of playtime I've had in the new Forza Motorsport, I had high hopes for Le Mans Ultimate. In fact, the only reason I purchased rFactor 2 was because I wanted to get a feel for what I expected the physics for Le Mans Ultimate to be. And today, I'm going to give you guys my first impressions of the game, completely unscripted. I'm doing, obviously, this voiceover in post after I've recorded the footage you're seeing here. So we're going to start off in the Ferrari 499P, which is a new car for Le Mans Ultimate. It was not an rFactor at all. And I have almost 100 hours in rFactor 2. I've become quite accustomed to the physics. I pretty much do a 1-hour race daily on rFactor 2 against the AI. Um, I have yet to drive the hypercars, as you can clearly tell, and that brings me to the first point of this game, is that the physics don't seem right. Something about it just doesn't feel like rFactor. And now, of course, the hypercars, almost all of them, with the exception of the van wall, are brand new to this whole studio. I mean, Studio 397 had never done anything with the hypercars, with the exception of the van wall. If you wanted to play with hypercars in rFactor 2, you had to rely on modifications for the game, like, stuff like the, I can't remember the exact name of it, but on the Steam Workshop, you can actually get the 499P and the 963, and I believe the Alpine A480, all through a Steam Workshop mod. So this is the first time, with the exception of the van wall, that these cars have made their debut in this physics engine. So maybe that's just it. Or maybe I really need some driver mod in these cars, and I'm just talking garbage. But the physics to me just felt a lot more icy. They didn't feel the same way they did in rFactor 2, which was kind of disappointing. I was genuinely hoping for kind of the same experience as rFactor 2 straight out of the gate when it came to the physics, and to not get that was kind of astonishing. As you can see, I'm really fighting the wheel. For those who are curious, this has all been done with a Thrustmaster T300 RS, so not quite the upper echelon of wheels. It's not even direct drive, which probably also plays a part into it, honestly, as non-direct drive wheels tend to be kind of rubber bandy from my experience. This is my first Thrustmaster. I've run Logitechs in the past, and I've absolutely loved those setups as well. I want to get direct drive eventually. That's beside the point here of what this video is. So right away, I mean, I was already frustrated. The online features didn't work right out the gate, which bothered me. I wasn't able to sign into my race control account, which was quite frustrating, as I'd like to be able to have everything working on day one. Now, obviously, the game's in early access, and maybe I should cut it some slack because of that, but I was genuinely just unimpressed with, how the game performed, and just, out of the gate. Like, I expected more out of it. Certain tracks, I noticed I had some severe issues with FPS. You can actually see very faintly in the top right-hand corner of the video my on-screen FPS counter. Now, I had just the default settings the game loaded with, so I have no clue what preset they were on because I couldn't get the menus to work enough to go and actually check my settings. I was barely able to get the controls to what I had in rFactor, such as my ignition and starter buttons, because I like to do those manually. Instead of just having the engine start itself as soon as I load in. It gives me a little bit more realism, and I love that. It's so unstable in the menus, and I'll show that later on in the video, as I literally recorded this and immediately booted up Premiere to record this voiceover and edit this out for you guys, so you guys could have it on day one. Now, of course, Bahrain as a track I'm not familiar with. I am going to say that. So cut me a little bit of slack on top of learning the physics in a car that I never experienced in rFactor. The only time I've driven this track in a video game is F123, and F1 cars, or I guess F122 as well. I guess F121 as well. Wow. I mean, the last 3 F1 games. We'll just say the F1 games. So I'm still learning this track and this car specifically, because I'm used to being able to bolt through this final corner here really fast in comparison to barely going 60 miles an hour in a hypercar. As you can see, though, I make some general improvements throughout the time that I'm driving on this track with the 499, which is, great to see. You always want to improve. But yeah, I mean, the game just fell off. I wasn't able to get the graphics setting figured out, so the FPS were so unstable. For those who want to know the specs of this computer to see how if you would be struggling with a similar issue, or possibly worse, as some people have reported, this has a Ryzen 9 5950X, a 3060 Ti, and it has 32 gigs of RAM. From I think this is well, I can't remember. It's G.Skill Royal something. I can't remember. Trident Royal, something like that. I don't remember. It's been years since I installed all that stuff. But anyway, so not a crappy computer by any means. It's not like my old APU HP laptop that had integrated graphics before Zen was a thing with Ryzen. And that's just something I was surprised to see. You've got a game studio that has developed one of the top racing sims, only getting beat out in popularity by iRacing in terms of realism. Like, come on. Like, I was genuinely expecting more. And sure, it does feel like rFactor 2 to an extent. The UI is all new for this game versus the rFactor 2 UI. One thing I noticed right away, though, about the UI is when you're clicking through menus and stuff and you're making your selections, it's the rFactor 2 sound effects. So I'm not mad about that because I don't hate the rFactor 2 sound effects. I'm the same guy who was really hoping with Gran Turismo 7 they would have a retro UI like sound option so I could revet the sound effects of Gran Turismo 2 and 3. In fact, I've done that with my Steam Deck. I actually added that to my Steam Deck, so now I can hear those noises every time I play around with it. But yeah, I mean, all in all, I mean, the driving experience is really hard on the hypercars. Like I said, I never played iRacing, so I know that a handful of them are in iRacing. I think it's mostly old LMP1 stuff. I think the new hypercars are exclusive to this game. I wish I had driven the GR10 on video because I have driven the GR10 in Gran Turismo 7 a few times, and I would have some way to kind of compare the physics. Maybe we'll do a video on that in the future, comparing Le Mans Ultimate with the GR10 and the Gran Turismo 7 version of the car. We'll find a track that's in both games, which is probably just one of being Monza or La Sarthe. Yeah, all in all, though, it's just been kind of interesting to say the least. So, yeah, I mean, the game, it's just rough. That's really all I can say about it in totality. Is just the game is so rough. It's unstable. The menus are unusable. The online not working just kind of was like kind of figures. You know, and it's a shame because like I said, there was a lot of hype for me. This game got announced at Le Mans last year, and I saw the announcement, and I was like, you know, pretty avid Gran Turismo 7 player at the time, and I was like, maybe it's time I jump into a more realistic sim. And Le Mans Ultimate promised to be just that. And so I had really high expectations going into this game. I've been looking forward to this launch day for months. Like I said, I bought rFactor 2 to try to get a head start on the physics because I wanted to, you know, come into this not looking like this. I mean, I look like an amateur again. It's crazy. It's really, really crazy. But yeah, all in all, though, I mean, at least the game looks good. It sounds good. I mean, the sound of the cars is incredible. I can't complain about that. As you can see, we're bringing in the pits because I wanted to see how the pit stops were. To me, when it comes to racing games, the coolest pit stop award goes to Gran Turismo 7, no doubt. I've played Forza. I've played, you know, like this. I've played rFactor. I've played Assetto. Gran Turismo has the best looking pit stops because they at least show what's going on with the car. You can see here in rFactor, the car just sits there, and that's it. I didn't even know the pit stop was over because I wasn't even looking at the timer. I was like looking around trying to figure out the controls and stuff. Gran Turismo 7, with how they do it, they actually show the mechanics working on the car, and so that was something I really hoped I would see with this game, because that's one of my favorite things about GT7 is that feature. But now we're going to back out of this, and we're actually going to show off probably the most frustrating part of the game so far, outside of the really slow, laggy menus. And that is actually the load time for the game. So we're going to go to the race weekend, which is, you know, how I'm going to play the game most of the time. I picked a track that I had driven in rFactor before because I wanted to get as best of a comparison as possible. I'd never driven the hypercars before. I've done hundreds of laps on Sebring at this point. So I picked an LMP2 as I've done laps on Sebring in the LMP2 cars. And it's probably going to be the most one-to-one comparison I could make in rFactor and Le Mans Ultimate. So obviously, I'm a bit of an Inter Europol fan. I really liked watching them last year. When they decided to move to IMSA, I was even more excited as an avid IMSA watcher. as well as WEC. I've been watching WEC much longer than I have been watching IMSA, but I was just like super thrilled about that, and just the story of Inter Europol was really cool. So, um, obviously that goes against my home country. I mean, United Autosport. I think Zach Brown being American, obviously means I should probably be rooting for them. But I just really like the Inter Europol stuff and all that garbage. I mean, it's just such a good team, and I really just wanted to rep them. So this is sped up. This took quite a long time, and I am really upset about that. R Factor 2's load times aren't great, but this is abysmal. I mean, this is awful, and I'm shocked. Like it, I just can't. It's insane. But we're gonna go ahead and let this time lapse through, and then we'll jump back in with the LMP2s. All right, so after waiting a long time for the game to load in, I will say the new UI looks great. It looks a lot better than our Factor 2s. But yeah, we're going to jump into Sebring and the LMP2. Now, I have driven LMP2s quite a bit on R Factor 2. Um, so this is I should know what I'm looking at straight away. Right away, I was like noticing the pit lanes different. I was like, wait, I'm used to being on the other side of the track. What's happening? I'm moving the wheel about, testing just kind of like an input lag. It's noticeable with my wheel. I don't know if that's just because it's not direct drive or if it's just the game. But yeah, you can look at the top right hand corner. I'm getting 40 FPS, it looks like, and it's kind of jumping around a little bit. Oddly enough, I leave the pit lane and all of a sudden it spikes, and I'm guessing that's just because there's a ton of cars in the pit lane and it's rendering probably the majority of them at once. Like I said, I don't know what the settings are in R Factor, or not R Factor, in this game in comparison to my R Factor 2 settings that I can get like 150 frames on during races. So we're out of the pits here, and we're coming into the final corner, which, as you guys know on Sebring, is awful. If you're unexperienced, it will throw you around quickly. Unfortunately for me, it almost got me. See, as you can see, I'm fighting the wheel. I will say this game, and I don't know if it's just me paying more attention to it, the track is a lot more bumpy. Now, like, Sebring is infamous for being bumpy, but on R Factor, it doesn't feel that bad. So maybe it's just me. Maybe, yeah, there we go. More of the physics being the physics, and me probably needing driver mod. The bumpiness of the track, I get absolutely ruined by the Ferrari 499P that was coming up behind me. I don't know the look back button. Like I said, the menus were so unusable that I was barely able to configure any of my controls. So rip me. As you can see here, that was more just drive error. I will completely take credit for that. I let that front left get caught in the grass, and you'd think I'd learned my lesson by now, because I do that all the time on Sebring, and it nails me every time. I get completely spun out every single time, and you'd think I'd learned my lesson by now. Apparently, I'm still a bit of an idiot and need to practice not getting my front right in the grass on that specific part of Sebring. But yeah, I mean, the physics have been probably the hardest thing for me to come to grips with. I mean, with this car, I noticed a lot more similarities. I will say, I noticed a lot more similarities with R Factor 2's physics and the LMP2, which gave me a little bit of hope after how horrible my experience in the hypercar was. I was a little nervous jumping into the LMP2 to really find out if the physics were bad. I noticed here is where there was a slight difference. This segment right here that I'm going through on Sebring, I'm usually able to go full throttle and not be scared at all. And that's even in TCRs, that's in GT3 cars. I haven't driven any of the GTE stuff there, which is why I didn't choose it for this segment. I wanted to specifically choose a track I've driven in R Factor and a car I've driven in R Factor, which was the Oreca 07. So yeah, I mean, let's just talk about the pros and cons here of this game. The pros are, it looks and sounds incredible. They've got the two most major senses of the human body down perfectly. The whine of the hybrid system on the 499P is intoxicating, and it's probably going to be the main reason I try to get good in hypercars in this game, and hopefully they fix the physics as it goes on, because I would love to experience the hypercars even more. With just the what's the word I'm looking for? Immersion of the sounds. With VR, this game would be insane, with just how it looks and the sounds being as good as they are. Uh, the car selection is great if you're a fan of the WEC. Now, obviously, there are some heavy hitters missing, such as the Garage 56 Camaro, which has been heavily requested. I'm in the Discord server for this game. I'm in the I've subscribed to the YouTube channel for it. I've subscribed to the Instagram page for it, to follow the Instagram page, I guess. And I noticed a lot of comments requesting the Garage 56 Camaro, and the fact that it's not here is a little bit disappointing because I would love to drive that. I've seen the car in person at Petit Le Mans when I was there in October at Road Atlanta, and it was a great thing just to see in person after, watching it give a lot of cars a run for their money at the actual 24 hours. So I was very, kind of disappointed. I wasn't really like sad, like, oh, I'm going to refund the game over this. Obviously, I still bought the game knowing the Garage 56 Camaro wasn't in there. I was holding out hope that it would be kind of a surprise entry, and they'd be like, surprise, guys, day one surprise for you guys, the Camaro's there. But it wasn't, and I was kind of bummed about that. But I guess the reasoning is because this game is meant to be a competitive multiplayer, and for the Garage 56 Camaro, which is a experimental car, hence the Garage 56 label, there's nothing for it to compete against. There's no other Garage 56. The Delta Wing's not in this game, so it doesn't give it any competition in terms of the Garage 56 designation, which is the only thing I can think of why it wasn't there. I don't think it was a licensing issue because the Cadillac's in the game, the V-Series R's in the game. So, I mean, I feel like if they were wanting to include the Garage 56 Camaro, it would be here. But I feel like the main reason is because it doesn't have any competition. But it would have been really cool to see it drive on multiple tracks because it only drove on Le Mans last year at Le Sarthe. As you can see here, I've kind of gotten the hang of this thing a little bit. I don't know if I've done what I wanted to do, and I was thinking of how I was going to edit this video while I was playing. So yeah, pros are the game looks great, it sounds great, the sounds are probably the biggest win for me. The car selection's pretty solid. You've gotten pretty much all but the Garage 56 Camaro from the 2023 calendar. So I'm hoping that in a few months we'll start to get, once the 2024 WEC season starts, which I believe starts this upcoming weekend with the prologue, we'll get some 2024 content. The LMGT3 class cars, the BMWs, the Lamborghini SC63, all the GT3 class cars, like I said, and obviously I hope they don't axe the LMP2s from competition. Like, I hope they don't do like a 2024 rule set and the LMP2 cars are gone and everything but at Le Sarthe. But I would love to see all of that stuff, all the new cars from this upcoming season in this game as well. So some of the cons now. Obviously, the instability is probably the worst offender. I've seen so many reports, and thankfully it only happened once, which is actually how this video ends. Spoiler alert. The game crashes a lot for some people. Some people have complained a lot about the games just crashing at pure random. Its performance is bad. The worst I notice in terms of performance are the unusable menus and my FPS kind of fluctuating more than it ever did on rFactor. It actually overloaded the encoder a couple times in OBS, which is a rare occurrence now. This computer's a lot more stout than my old ones have been in the past. Honestly, it's just, that's probably the biggest issue, is the instability. The lack of an online mode today. Now, obviously, I know that's more than likely just day one struggles. I wouldn't be surprised if so many people logged into the game that it overloaded the race control servers and caused it to not function, and that could be why the online isn't functioning. The physics are definitely a downer, and while after driving the LMP2 it made me feel a little bit better. As you can see, I'm P4 in the entire grid right now. Granted, my AI is at 85% strength. I'm sure if it were any higher I could be getting my butt handed to me, but regardless, the physics definitely aren't right. And anyway, those are the pros and cons of the game. So now we're looking at the menus and just how unresponsive they are. And that's where the game crashes. Yep, as you can see, it shows the connecting to race control screen. Unable to reach race control. Online features being unavailable. I'm waving the mouse frantically because the game completely locks up. So if that's just not a sign of what the physics are.